My name is Adrian Miller-Bradford, and I will be doing the chapter summary for Chapter 17 for Murray Zitman's Coercion and its Fallout. And so the title of this chapter was Positive Reinforcement at Home and School. Zitman starts off talking about the fact that children, they're in this stage of constantly in need of help. They're learning and exploring this new world, and we are their teachers. And as many of us know, being a teacher is a hard job, and it takes a lot out of us. If we react to a child's request for help with punishment, then we continue to participate in the cycle of coercion and counter-coercion. And so that's how Zitman starts off the chapter, and then the next section, titled At Home, he goes on to say that when becoming parents, we're not taught how to fulfill this responsibility of teaching our children how to explore this world. We learn that children will have their needs met any way that they know, any way that they can, any way that's possible. It can start off as just mere crying and yelling, and either gradually or quickly become aggression or destructiveness. Reinforcing this type of coercive practice can lead to the development of what are known as those little monsters. And so these little monsters they need to be avoided or escaped from. And then you add to just the daily stresses of life. And then sometimes this can lead to incidences of child abuse. And so Zitman goes on to say that punishment, while providing some peace for stressed out parents, has its side effects. One being that the child does not learn to effectively adapt, which is why Zitman advocates for positive reinforcement. In the presence of positive reinforcers, children can learn to become self-reliant. They can become competent. However, if used inappropriately, it can reinforce the wrong kinds of behavior. The idea, though, is to pay attention to the behavior that we want and ignore the behavior we don't want. In this way, misbehavior will not be the prevailing behavior. And of course, there are signs for the observant parent of impending misbehavior. Zitman proposes that acting during the signals is an effective use of positive reinforcement. By redirecting the child's behavior towards appropriate behavior, we can reinforce it. This, of course, does not mean that we just give the good stuff regardless of behavior. This actually robs the child of learning the pleasure of success and prevents success from becoming a conditioned reinforcer, from becoming a generalized conditioned reinforcer. Further, it could lead to an entitled, spoiled brat who resorts to anger and violence when they don't get their way. The goal, of course, is not a quid pro quo relationship. It's not a tit for tat. As parents, we just want our children to be successful and feel secure and loved. That's why we have to teach our children that we will always be there for them. This is why it is important for us to use positive reinforcement in our relationships. We avoid coercive practices and use those moments of failure as a teaching moment. We also keep expectations realistic, and we keep the reinforcers tailored to the child. In some instances, it may look like the behavior is too extreme and punishment must be the only option. For instance, dangerous behavior like self-harm or harm to self or harm to another individual. However, if we look closely at what the child is receiving from that behavior, like attention, for example, then we can start giving them the attention before the behavior occurs or when they are doing something else, some other acceptable behavior. It is not just enough to ignore the maladaptive behavior because their environment is set up in a way that the inappropriate behavior is the only way to get what they need. In this case, Sitman advocates for simply teaching your child that they can get what they want or what they need by just asking for it and asking in a nice and appropriate manner. Then, of course, there is the behavior that must be stopped immediately, and punishment becomes a necessity then. However, in a relationship built upon strong and just a lot of positive reinforcement, punishment every once in a while is okay. If these instances increase, then there is a cause for concern. Um, Positive reinforcement is, of course, it's for all relationships, not just for parents and children. Sidman states that giving love only under coerced contingencies reinforces the coerced contingencies. He links different types of addictions to the possibility of simply trying to escape from coercive relationships. And then also, as with children, so too can non-contingent love spoil adults. Sitman stresses that it is okay to set contingencies. Reinforcement, after all, is contingent upon behavior. It is to the person's disadvantage to treat them with respect and ask nothing of them. And then the example that Sidman gives is our relationships with the elderly. By not asking anything of them, we eliminate their ability to come in contact with positive reinforcers. He urges us to ask for their help with babysitting or finances, or just invite them along on family trips. Deprivation of these opportunities to receive positive reinforcers is like an unavoidable shock. The next section, in school, Sitman discusses how positive reinforcement is an awesome teaching tool. Unfortunately, it is not what we are trained to use as teachers. We are taught to deal with failures and not to reinforce new and novel behaviors. The goal of any teacher should be to make learning reinforcing on its own. The way to do this is to give students opportunities to use their new learning in ways that are rewarding for them. One example Sitman gives is a student learning to write well-organized and sensible paragraphs, and then just having him write about something he's passionate about, and then sending in his opinion to the local newspaper. This is just one of many ways to use positive reinforcers to reinforce learning. Unfortunately, in our educational system, we just bounce from one topic to another, teaching students how to pass tests. Through this environmental setup, teachers gravitate towards that small group of learners who actually pay attention. In our educational system, mastery or competence of a subject is not what we are grading. Sidman uses the example of grading on a curve, but we know that in this present time, it is passing those state assessments. Most students are just trying to pass the assessments so that they can move on to the next grade, and most teachers are trying to have as many students pass those assessments as possible in order to keep their jobs. All of which supports Sitman's claim that negative reinforcement reigns supreme in schools. This is not to say that positive reinforcement is the cure-all per se. In the next section, Sitman advocates for changing the way we teach. This is necessary because our current trial and error system uses coercion, even in the midst of positive reinforcement. Students are trying to avoid making mistakes and or failing grades. Errorless learning, however, provides learning without errors and the accompanying coercion. So in order to successfully teach students, the teacher must make sure the student has the necessary prerequisites, and the teacher must know what the end product looks like. Once the teacher has decided what to teach, behavioral analysis can tell the teacher if they succeeded or not. Errorless learning is still being researched, but it is one possible tool for removing coercion from schools and its accompanying side effects of dropouts and misconduct and just other instances of escape and counter control. Discipline and corporal punishment would become irrelevant because teachers would be able to teach effectively and students would be enmeshed in a rewarding learning environment. And so, based on errorless learning, my open-ended questions are, what do you know about errorless learning? How have you witnessed it being implemented? How have you heard it being discussed? What do you think about its possibilities? Thank you.